Sally had the opportunity to scale back her goals and make a career in Hollywood, perhaps as an acting instructor, but she abandoned the area in favor of an anonymous existence with a family she hardly cares about. Gene accomplished the incredible feat of eliminating the assassin who killed the love of his life, abducted him, and put his family in danger. But achieving that glory just encouraged him to seek out more of it in dangerous locations. Creating the travels of these secondary characters apart from the main character has been one of Barry's greatest achievements. It's impossible to ignore that Barry is what they all have in common, even though Fuchs, Hank, Sally, and Gene only have themselves to blame for their own slip-ups. All of their lives are impacted by his unrelenting reliance on violence, which makes it easier for them to act on their most unhealthy desires. And the only reason he can offer such a manual for regression is because he is the leading regressionist and the most distilled expression of Barry's ideas. The obvious hollowness of the term "starting now," which nearly became Barry Berkman's catchphrase, contains everything. A Nice Meal is similar to the penultimate episode of the previous season, when Barry was unable to speak or move, forcing him to listen to Ryan Madison's father. Barry is once more at the mercy of another man, this time the father of another victim, even though Barry wasn't the one who actually killed Ryan. Barry is wearing blackout goggles when the episode begins, and everything he sees is in his head, including the expansive plain where his family lives and the same purgatorial beach we saw while he was unconscious back in Candy Asses. While Jim Moss makes fun of his purportedly new faith, he furiously murmurs prayers and talks to his son. Eventually, Jim Moss inserts himself into Barry's vision. Barry has seen his family for the last time. The speaker makes this apparent in his statement. You won't be able to escape from this one. Of course, Jim's attention quickly shifts to Gene, and Barry escapes this one. Jim vanishes after learning that Barry told him he paid Gene $250,000, probably to inform the DA and police chief, which gives Barry time to grab a knife that was placed conveniently and escape. Like many Barry episodes, this one's plotline isn't ideal because everything fits together a little too tightly. Even if Gene was responsible for Janice's death, I'm not convinced Jim should prioritize busting Gene over catching an ex-military serial killer in his garage. And putting the knife there seems like an especially stupid choice. This episode has to move a number of people into position for the conclusion, which contributes in part to the problem. These episodes go quickly, and the characters sometimes feel like chess pieces that must be placed where they are needed. However, I truly enjoy this Gene story, which unfolds like a slow-motion tragedy despite the fact that we are unsure of how it will all go wrong. His motivations are dubious to begin with. He obviously has an issue with the studio making Janice's murder into a sensation, but Tom begins to see that the crusade may also benefit him. But when a UTA representative calls about Daniel Day-Lewis wanting to come out of retirement to play Gene in the Barry biopic, any pretense of honor is gone. Naturally, Gene can't help but accept the meeting, and naturally, in response to Sally's plea for assistance, he tells her he'll see her at his place later. He too finds Barry being played by Mark Wahlberg to be catnip. The most horrifying part of his plan is his assurance to the agent that Barry is a sympathetic soul, which gives the villain-averse Wahlberg no excuse to be reluctant to portray him. According to Gene, Barry killed Janice because he was envious and required Gene to be a father figure in his life. When he says, "This is not a good guy, bad guy story," it seems as though a piece of his soul is dying. However, when Gene arrives at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills for his alleged meeting with Mark Wahlberg, Jim, the DA, the police chief, and his own son greet him. I wasn't expecting the hushed money from Season 3 to return in this manner, but the way it plays out, with Gene seeming like he was conspiring with Barry from the outside, seems horribly appropriate. Even though we are aware that Gene is not a mafioso of the making, the evidence doesn't point in the right direction given Janice's probe at his theater, the murder at Gene's cabin, his proximity to Barry and the Raven, when Janice's body was discovered, the sizable payment, and his current outspoken support for Barry. You can't blame him. Even Leo seemed to have turned against his father. Gene might very well be a cold-blooded killer who also enjoys acting, according to everyone in this room. Someone like that is already known to us. The only character in Barry that has undergone significant change is Noah Hank, who has now fully through his transformation into a supervillain. He calls Barry from Sally's phone at the end of the episode to let him know that he has his wife and children. It doesn't matter that he's enticing Barry to please Fuchs after launching a rocket at his house, or that he hadn't intended to hunt down Barry's family in the first place. His men were searching for Gene, and they were still stranded outside Barry's house. This man enjoys using threats to exercise his dominance over others. Again, there are plot devices in the story. In just 2 episodes, Hank has gone from being Fuchs's friend and business partner to being his deadly adversary and now is urgently trying to win him back. However, this tale is also valuable since it may be Barry's last chance to get a hilarious but ultimately pointless Crown World subplot. And everything involving the dream team of 4 ultimate badasses that Hank initially hires to kill Fuchs is pretty much gold, from their hyped-up debut to their quick demise. Again, I recognize that Barry now skews more tragic, but even in these moments, I can still sense the show's darkly humorous core, notably in the brilliantly evocative scene that features 4 cardboard boxes with blood on the bottom. The moment is brilliantly timed. We piece together the reality as Hank does, and then he spells it out, opening each individual box to expected outcomes. There is no need for an explanation because it is obvious that they are human heads. Even earlier this season, the Hank we see in the episode's last scene would have been unrecognizable. Nevertheless, I'm delighted we get at least one more chance to witness him in pure comedy form, irate at the stupidity of his colleagues and flailing around aimlessly. The scene where Fuchs and his gang are attempting to come up with a method to protect his new woman and her daughter from the horrible side of gruesome deaths makes me feel in a similar way. The further it goes on, like many entertaining Barry tangents, the funnier it gets, with one gentleman observing that there is simply no way to prepare for a sneak attack. Barry's perspective on people stuck within themselves and completely powerless to withstand the draw of the dark side is nonetheless fundamentally comical, even in the absence of the punchlines. Even in some of the most gruesome sequences, I can still see Bill Hader's sense of humor, his enjoyment at individuals who are so pitiful that they will squander every second that the universe kindly gives them. With just 1 episode left, it already seems as though everyone's future has been decided, even though I have no idea how next week's conclusion will turn out. The main focus of Sally's plot in this episode is dragging John around Los Angeles. The crucial exchange occurs when she responds, "Keep doing what we're doing," to John's question about what they'll do after they see his father again. As Sally begins to comprehend what that actually looks like and begins to cry a little, the sound disappears. She also comes close to turning herself into a passing cop, backs off when she recognizes him as the man she killed, only to turn around and see the arrest of her son as the police car is still in view. The implication, in my opinion, is that she and her kid would have been spared by making the confession, and she now faces direct consequences for her decision. A different interpretation? In the episode's final scene, Barry is shown trembling and facing away from the camera, once more helpless and at his wit's end. A comparison to the start of the season is made. Do you recall Barry's time in prison? It seems like so long ago. The episode gives off the impression that we are receiving a pleasant break from the suffering, as if we were brought out to a nice supper while 4 men had their heads chopped off. Barry's A Nice Meal plays to the rafters, serving as one last reminder that it is a comedy, which is unusual for a show that has never cared much about what its viewers think of it.